Teacher made the autistic student laugh, without knowing he was the son of a widowed millionaire, and Emily Parker arrived at Washington Elementary School on that rainy Monday in March, carrying only a worn-out briefcase and a heart full of hope. At 28, she had spent the last few months substituting at different schools in Chicago, always with temporary contracts that barely covered the bills for the small apartment she shared with her sister. The principal, Patricia, had specifically called her to work with Ethan, an 8-year-old boy in the special education classroom who hadn't connected with any teacher in over 2 years. The boy showed signs of autism and, according to all reports, had remained completely silent since his mother passed away. "Ms. Parker, I need to be very clear with you," Patricia said, adjusting her glasses as they walked down the school hallway. "Ethan is a very difficult case. 5 different professionals have already tried. None could get him to participate in activities or even smile." Emily glanced at the school's peeling walls and the buckets scattered across the floor, catching leaks. Still, there was something about the place that made her feel she was exactly where she needed to be. "Do you have children, Patricia?" Emily asked, stopping in front of the special education classroom door. "I have 3. Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes children just need to feel that someone truly cares about them, not just about the work that needs to be done." Patricia sighed deeply, as if she'd heard those words many times before. "Look, I admire your optimism, but Ethan, he comes from a very complicated situation. His father works constantly and hardly ever shows up here. The boy stays with a caregiver who barely speaks proper English. It's really quite sad." Emily pushed open the classroom door and found Ethan sitting alone at a desk in the back, staring blankly at the wall. He wore a faded teal t-shirt and had straight brown hair cut simply. His eyes, though distant, held a special spark that Emily noticed immediately. "Hi, Ethan," she said softly, walking slowly toward him and crouching beside his desk. "My name is Emily. I'll be staying here with you for a while." The boy didn't respond or even glance her way. He kept staring at the wall as if she weren't there. "Ethan, Ms. Parker is talking to you," Patricia insisted. "At least look at her." Emily gestured subtly, asking the principal not to push. She had noticed Ethan flinch slightly when Patricia raised her voice. "It's okay, Ethan. You don't have to talk to me now if you don't want to," Emily said gently. "I'll just be here organizing a few things, and whenever you feel comfortable, we can try doing an activity together." Patricia shook her head, clearly unconvinced, and left the room, leaving the two alone. Emily began unpacking the materials she'd brought in her briefcase: colored paper, crayons, a few children's books, and a small musical keyboard she'd bought at a thrift store. As she arranged the items, she started humming softly, a song her grandmother used to sing to her as a child. It was a simple tune about a little bird who wanted to fly high but was afraid to leave the nest. Then she noticed something subtle. Ethan had tilted his head slightly toward the sound. He didn't look directly at her, but he was clearly listening to the melody. Emily kept humming as she organized the materials, pretending not to notice his reaction. Gradually, she began adding small gestures to the song's words, moving her hands like fluttering wings. Ethan turned his body to the side, still facing the wall, but now he was looking toward Emily. It was a small but meaningful step forward. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. During the first week, Emily established a careful routine. She always arrived 10 minutes early, greeted Ethan even when he didn't respond, and began her activities without pressuring him to participate. She sang, drew, told stories, and played simple melodies on the keyboard. Ethan remained at his desk, but Emily had noticed he grew restless when she stopped singing or when the room fell too quiet. It was as if her voice were an invisible thread keeping him connected to the world around him. A middle-aged man, thin and always dressed in blue work overalls, began appearing frequently in the hallways during Emily's lessons. He had introduced himself as Mike, the school's new janitor, and always found an excuse to pass by the special education classroom. "Sorry to interrupt, teacher," Mike said one morning, entering the room with a bucket and mop. "I need to clean this fan. It's making too much noise." Emily noticed Mike worked slowly, very slowly, always glancing discreetly at Ethan. The boy, in turn, seemed more relaxed when Mike was nearby, though he never interacted directly with him. "Mike, have you known Ethan for long?" Emily asked one afternoon when they met in the schoolyard. No, he replied quickly, looking nervous. "I mean, I haven't worked here long, but you always see the kids around, right? They're all special." There was something in the way Mike looked at Ethan that puzzled Emily. It wasn't the gaze of an ordinary staff member observing a student. It was deeper, more emotional. By the second week, Emily decided to try a different approach. Instead of sitting near Ethan, she positioned herself across the room and began telling a story about a boy with a special gift. He could hear people's feelings through music. "This boy," Emily said, gesturing enthusiastically, "discovered that every person had their own melody in their heart. Some were sad, others joyful, but all were beautiful in their own way." Ethan turned his head for the first time and looked directly at Emily. The eye contact lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to make her heart race. "The boy in the story realized people were happy when he played their melodies on the piano," Emily continued, slowly moving toward the keyboard. "So he decided he would spend his whole life making music to bring others joy." Emily began playing a soft melody on the keyboard. For the first time since she'd arrived at the school, Ethan stood up from his desk and took a few steps toward the instrument. Mike, who had been organizing cleaning supplies in the hallway, appeared in the doorway just as Ethan approached the keyboard. Emily saw tears in the janitor's eyes, but he quickly turned away and left. Ethan stopped a few feet from the keyboard and stood there, as if an invisible barrier kept him from getting closer. Emily kept playing, but now watched the boy's every move. Suddenly, Ethan began swaying slightly to the rhythm of the music. It was almost imperceptible, but Emily noticed. He was dancing, or at least trying to. "Do you like music, Ethan?" she asked softly, still playing. He didn't answer with words, but he added a small arm movement to his subtle sway. It was the first time Ethan had shown any kind of expression since Emily had arrived. At that moment, through the classroom window, Emily saw Mike standing in the yard, watching the scene with a look of pure emotion. There was something very strange about how the janitor took such an interest in Ethan's progress. By the third week, Emily decided to dig a little deeper into the boy's story. She looked for Patricia during recess to talk about Ethan's family. "Patricia, can you tell me a bit more about Ethan's family situation?" Emily asked, sitting down in the principal's office. "Well, Emily, it's quite complicated," Patricia replied, nervously shuffling papers on the desk. "From what I know, his father works at various construction sites around the city. He doesn't make much, struggles just to pay for the boy's transportation. His mother, well, she passed away when Ethan was very young." "And who brings him to school and picks him up?" "A woman his father hired to take care of him, Mrs. Jenkins. She's very simple, barely knows how to read, but she's devoted to the boy." Emily noticed something odd in the way Patricia avoided her gaze while talking about Ethan's family. It was as if she were hiding important details. "What's his address? I'd like to do a home visit to better understand the environment Ethan lives in." "Oh, I'm not sure that's a good idea, Emily," Patricia said quickly. "His family is very private. They don't like visits from the school. But it's standard procedure to do this kind of follow-up, Patricia, especially for children with special needs. I understand your concern, but in this specific case, I think it's best to respect the family's privacy." Emily left the principal's office with more questions than answers. There was something that didn't add up in this whole story. Why so much secrecy around a supposedly simple family? And why did Mike, the janitor, show such interest in Ethan's progress? That afternoon, while working with Ethan on a painting activity, Emily noticed the boy had drawn a large house with many windows. It wasn't the kind of drawing she'd expect from a child living in humble conditions. "What a beautiful house, Ethan," she said, studying the details. "Is that where you live?" Ethan stopped painting and stared at the paper for a long moment. Then, for the first time since Emily had met him, he shook his head. It was a clear and definite no. "No? Then what house is this?" Ethan picked up a blue pencil and wrote slowly but legibly, "Mommy's house." Emily's heart ached. Ethan was drawing memories of his mother, a house where he might have been happy before the loss that changed his life forever. Mike appeared at the door just then, as he always did during the most significant moments. He saw Ethan's drawing, and his expression changed completely. There was recognition in his eyes, as if he knew that house. "Mike, are you okay?" Emily asked, noticing the janitor had gone pale. "Yeah, teacher. It's just nice to see the boy drawing, isn't it? Means he's making progress." But Emily could tell Mike couldn't take his eyes off Ethan's drawing. There was a connection there she didn't yet understand. That night, Emily went home with her mind racing. She decided to research teaching methods for autistic children online, but ended up stumbling upon an old news article that caught her attention. The headline read, "Businessman William Parker loses wife in accident, steps back from work to care for special needs son." The article was from 3 years ago and showed a photo of a well-dressed man beside a beautiful woman and a little boy. Emily looked closer at the boy in the picture, and her heart skipped a beat. It was Ethan. But what shocked her the most was the photo of the father. After a few seconds studying the facial features, Emily had a revelation that left her breathless. The businessman William Parker in the photo was identical to Mike, the school janitor. Emily spent the entire night trying to process that information. Why would a wealthy businessman pretend to be a janitor at the school where his own son studied? What kind of game was this? The next morning, Emily arrived at school determined to uncover the truth. She found Mike sweeping the courtyard and decided to confront him subtly. "Mike, can I ask you a personal question?" she said, approaching him. "Of course, teacher, go ahead. Do you have any children?" Mike stopped sweeping and fell silent for a few seconds. Emily could see the internal struggle reflected in his eyes. "Yes, I do," he finally answered. "A boy, but it's complicated." "Complicated how?" "He's special, you know. He struggles to connect with people. He's seen many professionals, but no one has ever truly been able to help him." Emily realized Mike was talking about Ethan, but still maintaining the pretense that he didn't know him personally. "That must be very hard for you, Mike, seeing your son suffer and not being able to help him." "It's the worst feeling in the world, teacher," he said, and Emily saw tears forming in his eyes. "You do everything, try every treatment, hire the best professionals, but nothing works. Then you start wondering if the problem isn't you. Why would you think you're the problem?" Mike leaned on the broomstick and looked toward the horizon. "Because maybe I'm not the father he needs. Maybe I'm so lost in my own pain that I can't see what he truly needs." Emily felt the urge to hug this man who was clearly suffering, but she knew she had to be careful not to force a confession. "Mike, can I tell you something? Over the past few weeks, working with Ethan, I've noticed something very important." Mike turned to her immediately, alert. "What did you notice?" "That he responds better when he feels he's not being judged or pressured. It's like he needs space to be himself at his own pace." "And you think that's working with him?" "It is. He looks me in the eyes now, moves around the room, expresses preferences. They're small steps, but they're signs he's opening up." Mike closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "Teacher Emily, can I ask you something now?" "Of course. What would you do if you found out the parents of a special child were lying about their identity to protect him?" Emily's heart raced. Mike was practically confessing, but indirectly. "I'd try to understand the reasons behind the lie," she answered carefully, "and if I realized the reasons were justified and the situation was helping the child, I'd do everything to protect that secret." Mike opened his eyes and looked directly at Emily. At that moment, she was absolutely certain she was speaking to William Parker, Ethan's father. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Over the following days, Emily and Mike developed a silent partnership. She continued working with Ethan in the classroom, while Mike always found an excuse to be nearby, discreetly observing his son's progress. Ethan had begun communicating through drawings and simple gestures. He still didn't speak, but his facial expressions became more animated. and he showed clear preferences for certain activities. One morning, Emily arrived at school and found a discreet note on her desk. Ethan loves classical music, especially piano. His mother used to play Gershwin for him when he was a baby. Maybe that will help. A friend. Emily smiled, knowing exactly who had left that note. That afternoon, she brought a small stereo and played a piece by Gershwin while Ethan drew. The reaction was immediate and moving. Ethan stopped drawing, closed his eyes, and tilted his head, as if drinking in every note of the music. When the piece ended, he looked at Emily and for the first time smiled. It wasn't a full smile, but it was enough to make Emily jump for joy. Mike, who was fixing a faucet in the hallway, had to step away quickly to hide his tears. Ethan's smile marked a turning point in his development. In the days that followed, he began imitating some of Emily's gestures, participating more actively in activities, and even making some sounds when deeply focused. But Ethan's progress brought an unexpected problem. Patricia started pressuring Emily to speed up the process and include Ethan in the regular class activities. "Emily, I understand you're getting results with Ethan, but we can't let him stay isolated in the special needs room forever," Patricia said during a meeting. "Inclusion is important for his development." "Patricia, I agree inclusion is important, but it has to be gradual. Ethan is still in a very delicate stage of opening up. If we push too hard now, we could lose all the progress. But there's pressure from the school board. They want to see more concrete results, faster." Emily realized there were other forces at play beyond Ethan's well-being. The school was under pressure for results, and Patricia was passing that pressure on to her. What exactly is the board asking for? They want Ethan integrated into the second-grade class by the end of the semester. Otherwise, they'll question the need to keep the special education room running. Emily felt the ground drop beneath her feet. This wasn't just about Ethan. It was about the existence of the entire special education program. What if I can show that Ethan is making progress in the special needs room? Wouldn't that be enough to keep the program? "Emily, I admire your dedication, but you're a substitute teacher. You don't have job security. The board needs guarantees that the investment in the program is paying off." That afternoon, Emily shared her concerns with Mike during a chance meeting in the schoolyard. "Mike, I'm really worried about the pressure they're putting on Ethan," she said, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "What kind of pressure?" "They want to force him into the regular class before he's ready, and if he can't adjust, they might use it as an excuse to shut down the special education room." Mike was silent for a long moment, clearly processing the implications. "What do you think should be done?" "Honestly, I think Ethan needs more time, and I think he needs support from people who truly care about him, not just statistics and results. Emily, can I tell you a secret?" She turned to him, finally expecting the confession she'd been waiting weeks for. "I'm not who you think I am," Mike said, but before he could continue, Patricia appeared in the yard. "Emily, can you come here for a minute? I need to talk to you about Ethan." Mike quickly stepped away, and Emily walked over to the principal with a heavy heart. "Emily, I got a call from the board. They're sending a committee next week to evaluate Ethan's progress and decide the future of the special education room." "What exactly does that mean?" "That means Ethan will have to demonstrate specific skills, social interaction, verbal communication, ability to follow group instructions. If he can't, the program will be terminated." Emily felt a mix of anger and despair. How could they reduce a special child's progress to a checklist of skills to be performed under pressure? "Patricia, this is absurd. Ethan isn't a robot program to perform. He's a child recovering from deep trauma." "Emily, I understand your frustration, but I don't make the rules. If we want to keep the program, we need to show concrete results." That night, Emily went home completely devastated. It felt like all the careful work of the past weeks was about to be destroyed by an arbitrary, insensitive evaluation. The next morning, she found another note on her desk. "Don't give up on Ethan, he trusts you." "And so do I. We'll find a way to protect him together. W." The initial W confirmed Emily's suspicions. William Parker was here, disguised as a janitor, fighting to protect his son the only way he knew how. During class that day, Emily decided to prepare Ethan for what was coming, but carefully without scaring him. "Ethan, next week some people are coming to visit our school," she said as they played with colorful clay. "They want to meet you and see how you're learning." Ethan stopped shaping the clay and looked at Emily with concern. "You don't have to be afraid," she continued. "You don't need to do anything special. Just be yourself, like you always are with me." Ethan picked up the blue clay and made a small ball, then a bigger one, and then an even larger one. It was the first time he had created a logical sequence with the materials. "How interesting, Ethan. You made a family of clay balls," Emily said excitedly. Ethan pointed to the small ball, then to himself, then to the medium-sized ball and pointed at Emily, and finally pointed to the big ball and looked toward the classroom door. Emily understood immediately. Ethan was representing himself, her, and a third person who was important to him, but who stayed outside watching. "Ethan, would you like that big person to be in here with us?" Ethan nodded vigorously. "Who is that person, Ethan?" The boy stayed silent for a moment, then picked up a pencil and wrote with difficulty. "Daddy." Emily's heart raced. Ethan knew who Mike was. He'd probably always known. "Is your daddy here at school, Ethan?" Ethan looked at the door and then back at Emily, as if asking permission to share a secret. "It's okay, Ethan, you can tell me." Ethan stood up, went to the window, and pointed to the yard where Mike was sweeping dry leaves. Then he returned to Emily and whispered the first word she had ever heard him speak. "Daddy." Emily had to hold back tears right then. Not only had Ethan spoken, he had revealed he'd always known his father was here. "Why doesn't your daddy come into the classroom to talk with us, Ethan?" Ethan picked up the clay and made two figures, one small and happy, the other big and sad. Then he separated them with a barrier made of clay. Emily understood. Ethan sensed his father was hurting and somehow felt responsible for that pain. The barrier represented the emotional distance they had created between them. "Ethan, would you like me to talk to your daddy?" The boy looked into Emily's eyes for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, I'll talk to him today." That afternoon, Emily looked for Mike in the schoolyard. She had made a decision. It was time to bring the truth to light. "Mike, or rather William," she said, moving closer to him. "We need to talk." William stopped sweeping and looked at Emily with a mix of relief and dread. "You found out." "Ethan told me. Actually, I think he always knew you were here." "And now? Are you going to report me? Tell the principal who I really am?" "William, first of all, I need to understand why you're doing this. Why is a successful businessman working as a janitor at his own son's school?" William leaned on the broom and took a deep breath before answering. "Because every other professional who tried to help Ethan was only interested in my money. Expensive therapists promising miracles, private schools that just wanted media attention for enrolling a well-known businessman's son. No one truly cared about him. And you think pretending to be someone else solves that? Emily, for the past 3 years, since my wife passed, I've tried everything. Spent a fortune on treatments, took Ethan to the best specialists in the country, but nothing worked because they saw him as an interesting case or a business opportunity, not a child who was suffering." Emily began to understand the logic behind William's decision. "So you decided to disguise yourself to see how Ethan would be treated if he were just a poor kid at a public school." "Exactly. And you know what I found? That you were the first person to look at Ethan and see just a child who needed love and attention. You didn't see a diagnosis, an opportunity, or money. You just saw my son." Emily felt tears forming in her eyes. "William, Ethan is making progress because he feels you care about him. Even disguised, even from a distance, he knows you're there for him. But I don't know how to get close to him again, Emily. I'm afraid I'll ruin everything. I'm afraid he'll reject me." "He won't reject you, William. In fact, I think he's waiting for you to take the first step." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. William and Emily talked for nearly an hour that afternoon, planning how they could work together to help Ethan. But they also had an urgent problem: the committee's evaluation the following week. "William, You need to know they're threatening to shut down the special education classroom if Ethan doesn't show specific progress by next week. What kind of progress? Social interaction, verbal communication, ability to follow group instructions. Basically, they want him to behave like a typical child. William was furious. That's absurd. Ethan has autism. He won't behave like a typical child and he shouldn't be forced to. I completely agree, but we don't make the rules. If we want to protect Ethan and keep the program running, we need to find a way to show his progress without forcing him to do things he's not ready for. Emily, can I tell you something that might help? Of course. Ethan has always been very intelligent. Before his mother's accident, he was reading at 5, knew basic math, had an impressive memory for music and history. The issue isn't intellectual ability, it's that he shut down emotionally. That means he might have skills he hasn't shown me yet. Exactly. Maybe if you create an environment where he feels completely safe, he could demonstrate some of those skills for the committee. Emily had an idea. William, what if you were present during the evaluation? Not as a janitor, but as yourself, as his father. Do you think that would help? I think Ethan needs to feel that the two of you are united, that you're on the same side. If he realizes that you trust me and that I trust you, maybe he'll feel safe enough to open up. William Parker fell silent for a few minutes, clearly wrestling with deep fears and insecurities. Emily, can I confess something to you? Of course. I blame myself for Ethan's condition. I think if I had been a better father, more present, more attentive, maybe he wouldn't have reacted so badly to losing his mother. William, you can't blame yourself for how a child processes trauma. Ethan isn't like this because of you. But what if he never forgives me for lying about who I was? What if he feels like I abandoned him when he needed me most? Look, I can't guarantee how Ethan will react, but I can tell you what I've noticed these past few weeks. He speaks of you fondly. When he draws his family, he always includes you. When he's sad, he looks to where you usually are. I think he misses you just as much as you miss him. That night, Emily and William met again to refine their plan for the following week. They had decided it was time for Ethan to learn the truth. How do you think we should approach this with him? William asked. Gradually. Tomorrow you can come into the classroom as Mike, but maybe stay a little closer, interact a bit more. The next day, you can slowly reveal who you are. What if he gets scared? What if he regresses? William, trust is a two-way street. If you don't trust Ethan, he won't trust you. You have to believe he's stronger than you think. The next morning, Emily was nervous but hopeful. She had prepared a special activity for the day, a family project where Ethan could express his feelings about the important people in his life. Mike showed up to clean the windows at the start of class. Emily gave him a subtle signal to come closer. Ethan, can Mike stay here with us today while we do our activity? She asked. Ethan looked at Mike, then at Emily, and nodded. Mike, Ethan is working on a family project. Would you like to see? Mike walked over to the table where Ethan was working. The boy had drawn 3 figures, a small one, a medium-sized one, and a large one. All were smiling and holding hands. That's a beautiful drawing, Ethan, Mike said, his voice thick with emotion. Is this your family? Ethan looked at Mike for a long moment, then pointed to the small figure and said, Ethan. He pointed to the medium figure and said, Teacher Emily. Finally, he pointed to the large figure and whispered, Daddy Mike. Mike had to steady himself against the table to keep from falling. Ethan knew him as Daddy Mike, not just as Mike the janitor. Ethan, Mike said, crouching to the boy's level, did you know Daddy was here all along? Ethan nodded. And you weren't mad at Daddy for not telling the truth? Ethan shook his head no, then stood up and hugged Mike for the first time in nearly 3 years. Emily had to step out of the room for a few minutes to cry. When she returned, she found father and son sitting together, looking at the family drawing. Ethan, Emily said, sitting with them, would you like Daddy to stay here with us during class? Ethan looked at Mike, then at Emily, and said clearly, Yes, I do. It was the first full sentence Ethan had spoken since Emily had met him. For the rest of the week, Mike participated in activities as Ethan's father, no longer as the janitor. Patricia was initially confused, but Emily explained that she had managed to contact the family and that the father had decided to become more involved in his son's education. Ethan blossomed with his father's open presence. He began speaking simple phrases, interacting more directly with Emily, and even showing interest in getting to know other children at school. On Friday, the day before the committee's evaluation, Emily, William, and Ethan were working together on a music activity when Ethan asked a question that took everyone by surprise. "Daddy, why were you sad when Mommy left?" William was moved by his son's direct and honest question. "Ethan, I was sad because I loved Mommy very much, and when someone we love leaves, it hurts our heart." "My heart hurt too," said Ethan, "but it doesn't hurt anymore." "Why doesn't it hurt anymore, Ethan?" "Because Daddy came back, and Teacher Emily is here, and Mommy is in my heart." William and Emily exchanged glances, both with tears in their eyes. Ethan had processed his loss in a deep and mature way. "Ethan," said Emily, "tomorrow some people will come here to meet you. They want to see how you're learning and growing." "Are they pretty?" Ethan asked, surprising everyone with the spontaneity of his question. "I don't know if they're pretty, but I'm sure they'll really enjoy meeting you," Emily replied, laughing. "Will Daddy stay here too?" "If you want, I'll stay," said William. "I want." "And you too, Teacher Emily." "Of course I'll stay, Ethan." Ethan thought for a moment, then said, "I'll show them my ball family and sing Mommy's song." Emily and William exchanged glances again. Ethan was preparing for the evaluation in the most natural way possible, by being himself. On Monday morning, the committee arrived at the school consisting of 3 people: the district's educational coordinator, a psychologist specializing in special education, and a representative from the Department of Education. Emily had carefully prepared the classroom, displaying Ethan's work and organizing the materials in a welcoming way. William was present as his father, dressed formally for the first time in months. "Good morning, Ethan," said the educational coordinator, a middle-aged woman with a serious expression. "My name is Dr. Robinson. We're here today to meet you and see how you're learning at school." Ethan looked at Emily, then at William, and finally replied, "Good morning, Dr. Robinson. Do you want to see my ball family?" The naturalness of his response surprised all the committee members. They had expected a withdrawn, non-communicative child, but instead found a boy who, though still shy, was clearly engaged. Ethan showed his drawings, explained his clay activity, and even sang a simple melody Emily had taught him. Throughout the presentation, he remained calm and confident, always checking to make sure Emily and William were nearby. "Ethan," said the psychologist, "do you like coming to school?" "Yes. Teacher Emily is pretty and sings to me. And Daddy stays here now too." "And do you have friends here at school?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Not yet. But Teacher Emily said I can meet other kids when I'm ready." "And when do you think you'll be ready?" "When I'm not scared anymore," Ethan answered with touching honesty. The committee spent 2 hours observing Ethan and asking questions. They saw not only his academic progress, but also his emotional and social growth. At the end of the evaluation, Dr. Robinson spoke privately with Emily and William. "Teacher Emily, we must acknowledge that the work done here with Ethan is exceptional," she said. "We rarely see such significant progress in a child with his profile. Thank you, Dr. Robinson. But I must say, Ethan's progress was only possible because he had his family's constant support and an environment that respected his individual pace." "Mr. Parker," said the psychologist, addressing the father, "your presence here was crucial for Ethan's development. It's rare to see such dedicated paternal involvement." William wasn't sure if he should reveal his disguise as a janitor, but decided to keep some things private. "Ethan is my priority," he said simply. "I'll do whatever it takes to help him." A week later, Emily received a call from Patricia with the committee's decision. "Emily, I have good news," said the principal, clearly relieved. The committee not only approved keeping the special education classroom open, but also recommended you be officially hired as the specialized teacher. Emily nearly shouted with joy. "And there's more," Patricia continued. They want to use Ethan's case as a model for other schools in the district. They'll invest in teacher training and improve the special education program's structure. When Emily shared the news with William and Ethan, the boy had a reaction neither expected. "Does this mean teacher Emily isn't leaving anymore?" Ethan asked. "That's right, Ethan. She'll stay here with you as long as needed," William replied. Ethan fell silent for a moment, processing the information. Then suddenly he began to laugh, a pure, joyful, contagious laugh. It was the first genuine laughter they'd heard from him in 3 years. "Why are you laughing, Ethan?" Emily asked, unable to hold back her own laughter. "Because now my family is complete," Ethan said. "There's Dad, there's teacher Emily, and there's me, and no one's leaving anymore." In the following months, their lives transformed completely. Ethan kept progressing, not just academically but socially. He began interacting with other children at Washington Elementary, always with Emily nearby to support him when needed. William gradually resumed his business activities, but in a different way. He'd learned the importance of being present in his son's life and restructured his work to have more free time. Emily discovered her true calling, working with special needs children. She developed innovative teaching methods later implemented in other schools. But the biggest change was in William and Ethan's relationship. They'd rebuilt their father-son bond on a new foundation: honesty, patience, and unconditional love. 6 months after the committee's evaluation, Ethan was partially integrated into a mainstream class, joining some activities with other children while still receiving individualized support from Emily when needed. One afternoon, as Ethan played in the yard with a few classmates, Emily and William watched from a distance. "Do you regret anything, William?" Emily asked. "I regret not trusting the right people sooner," he answered. "What about you? Do you regret taking this job?" "Never. Ethan taught me that sometimes the greatest rewards come from the biggest challenges." Ethan ran up to them, breathless and smiling. "Dad, teacher Emily," he shouted. "I made 3 friends today, and they want to come over this weekend." William and Emily exchanged a glance and smiled. The child who just months ago had been withdrawn and silent was now making social plans. "Of course they can come, Ethan," William said. "We'll have a garden party." "Is teacher Emily coming too?" "If she wants to," William said, looking at Emily. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she replied. That night, while organizing teaching materials in the classroom, Emily found a drawing Ethan had made that day. It was a big house with many windows, like the first one he had drawn months earlier, but this time there were several human figures in front of the house: Ethan, William, Emily, and other children, all smiling and holding hands. The next day, when Emily showed the drawing to William, he was moved. "Do you know what this means?" he said. "What?" "Ethan isn't living in the memory of his mother's house anymore. He's building new memories in a home where he can be happy again." Emily looked at the drawing and noticed something she hadn't seen before. Ethan had written at the bottom of the page, "My happy family." A year later, Ethan was fully integrated into the regular class, though he still received specialized support a few times a week. He had become one of the most popular kids at Washington Elementary School, known for his kindness and his ability to help other classmates going through tough times. Emily had been promoted to Regional Special Education Coordinator, developing innovative programs in several schools. But she made sure to keep a few hours each week working directly with Ethan. William had expanded his business, but now with a social focus. He created a foundation that provided financial and educational support for children with special needs in public schools. One afternoon, during a meeting at the school to discuss new inclusion projects, Ethan appeared in the room looking for Emily. "Teacher Emily," he said, "can I talk to you?" "Of course, Ethan, what is it?" Ethan looked around the room, saw there were several people present, but still decided to speak. "I wanted to thank you," he said seriously. "Thank me for what, Ethan?" "For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, for helping me find my dad again, and for teaching me that it's possible to be happy even after sad things happen." The room fell silent. Ethan's simple but profound words touched everyone's hearts. "Ethan, you don't have to thank me," Emily said, moved. "You taught me much more than I ever taught you." What did I teach you? You taught me that love is the most powerful force in the world, that patience and dedication can move mountains, and that every child has their own time to bloom. Ethan smiled and turned to the audience of educators watching the conversation. Did you know Teacher Emily saved my life? He said matter-of-factly. How so, Ethan? Asked one of the teachers present. She brought me back to the world. Before her, I was lost in a dark and sad place. She taught me I could trust people again. William, who had just arrived, heard his son's words and felt his heart overflow with gratitude. Ethan is right, he said, stepping closer. Emily didn't just save my son's life, she saved our family. That evening, the three had dinner together at William's house, as they had started doing every Friday. It was a tradition that had emerged naturally, a way to celebrate the bonds they had built. Dad, Ethan said during dinner, do you remember when you pretended to be the janitor at school? William nearly choked on his food. You knew the whole time. Of course I knew. You're my dad. I'd recognize you no matter what. And why didn't you ever say anything? Ethan thought for a moment before answering. Because I realized you were hurting just as much as I was, and I thought if I pretended not to know, you'd be less sad. Emily and William exchanged glances, amazed by Ethan's emotional maturity. Ethan, you were protecting your father while he thought he was protecting you, said Emily. That's how families work, right? Ethan replied. Everyone takes care of everyone. 2 years later, Ethan was in the 4th grade, one of the top students in his class, and had become a mentor to other children with special needs who joined the school. Emily had married a fellow teacher and was expecting her first child. She and William had become close friends, forever bonded by the experience of helping Ethan rebuild himself. William had found a new purpose in life through his foundation, which had already helped hundreds of children and families in similar situations. But their greatest achievement was Ethan. The boy who never smiled had become a radiant child, full of dreams and plans for the future. One October afternoon during the celebration of Emily's 8th anniversary at the school, Ethan had insisted on commemorating the date every year. He gave a speech that perfectly captured their journey. When Mrs. Parker first came here, Ethan said, standing on a chair so everyone could see him, I was broken inside, like a toy that had fallen apart and no one knew how to fix. The audience of teachers, students, and parents listened in silence. But Mrs. Parker didn't try to fix me, Ethan continued. She just stayed with me and helped me put myself back together, piece by piece, in my own time. Emily was crying, as were most of the people there. And my dad was broken too, but in a different way. He was broken from missing me and worrying about me. Mrs. Parker helped us put ourselves back together too. Ethan looked at Emily and William, who stood side by side in the front row. Now I want to be like Mrs. Parker when I grow up. I want to help other broken kids put themselves back together, because I've learned that sometimes you have to break a little to become stronger. The speech ended with an emotional round of applause. Ethan climbed down from the chair and ran to hug Emily and William. Thank you for teaching me that family isn't just who you're born with, he said. Family is who chooses to stay with you, even when it's hard. That night, on her way home, Emily reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with a simple temporary job at a public school. She had arrived thinking she would teach, but ended up learning lessons about love, patience, courage, and family that she would never forget. Ethan was right. Sometimes we need to break a little to become stronger, and sometimes the best families are the ones we build with our hearts, not just with blood. The story of Emily, William, and Ethan became legendary at Washington Elementary School, inspiring many other educators to see their profession not just as a job, but as a mission to transform lives. And Ethan, who had once been a lost child trapped in silence, grew up to become a young lawyer specializing in the rights of children with special needs, dedicating his life to ensuring that others like him had the same opportunities he'd been given. Emily continued teaching until she retired, but she always said Ethan had been her greatest teacher. And William, who had once hidden behind the identity of a janitor, learned that true wealth isn't in the businesses we build, but in the relationships we nurture. The special education classroom at Washington Elementary became a national model, welcoming visitors from across the country who wanted to learn about the methods Emily had developed. And every Friday, without fail, Emily, William, and Ethan still gathered to have dinner together, celebrating the unlikely family that fate had brought together through a classroom, a disguise, and lots of love. The end of the story. Now tell us, what did you think of this heartwarming story? Do you believe love and dedication can truly transform lives like it did for Ethan? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like to help us keep bringing you stories that touch the heart. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring tales like this one.